Good evening and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. On our program, new 2016 laws, the whys and hows of charitable giving, and drone racing. But first, a high school water polo player in Lafayette is facing felony charges for a blow that broke an opponent's nose during a game. The case has coaches, athletes, and parents talking about the legal ramifications for school sports. Joining me to discuss this is Jill Tucker, San Francisco Chronicle education reporter. Hi, Jill.
Hi.
Well, this happened in September during a junior varsity match between Lafayette's Acalanes High School and San Jose's Bellarmine College Prep. What led up to the incident, and what was the extent of the injuries?
Well, we're not exactly sure what came before the incident. The two teams were playing in a water polo match, and one of the players, the Acalanes player, had the ball, according to people who have seen a video of the game, and he threw the ball away to another player. And apparently the camera stayed on the two players, the defender from Bellarmine and the Acalanes player, and the Bellarmine's player head went under the water, and he either was kneed in the nose or kicked in the nose, but came up from the water with a broken nose. And according to the people familiar with the case, it was a very deliberate action away from the play of the game, and the young man apparently had a broken nose, required surgery, had some significant medical issues.
And so therefore Contra Costa County prosecutors have filed felony assault and battery charges. It's my understanding that video was circulating for a while, but it seems like it has now been taken off and you can't really find it online anymore.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah. Doesn't unsportsmanlike conduct happen every day, though, in school sports and professional sports? I mean, how does this rise to the level of a criminal case?
Well, that's absolutely true. I mean, anybody who has a kid who's ever played Little League or football or watched professional sports, you see this type of behavior that is, not part of the play. That is, whether it's a baseball player charging the mound after being hit by a pitch, or perhaps an elbow thrown in a Warriors basketball game, we do see that unsportsmanlike conduct, and rarely do we ever see it go to the courts. I think what's happening now when we talk to legal experts, what they're saying is everything's on film now. I mean, every parent has a phone and they're taking video of games, so we have something to see exactly what happened. And in this particular case, we had parents willing to pursue it.
So then what should the standards be? Do we need to rethink the culture of sports at school, in professional sports, but particularly at school? Because this kind of incident, if it had happened in the schoolyard or on a street, would have been clearly a case of criminal intent. You could pursue it in a court of law. But there are those now who say that this was a case during a sporting match. It should stay within that realm and not have to go through the criminal justice system.
Yeah, this has launched a huge debate because I think there is definitely a culture when that clock is ticking and when the players are on the field of play. We have a standard of behavior that's acceptable in professional sports and in youth sports that says it's okay to throw that punch, or it's okay to throw that knee, or to trip somebody or step on their head. It's part of the sport. Water polo is a very physical game. I think a lot of it we don't see because it happens underwater, but in talking to a lot of parents, there's a lot of broken noses, there's a lot of scratches. And I think this really raises the question of whether society wants to change that, and are the courts the best place to push that issue? Legal scholars are on both sides of that debate. Some people say this is a way to change that culture. We don't want our kids kneeing each other in the nose or elbowing each other in the face. We don't want that. We want them to play sports, but do we want to teach them that hitting each other is okay if the clock is running? And
it certainly is a tough issue because when they look at professional sports, when professional players do this kind of thing, they get fined and penalized, but they're not hauled into a criminal court. So certainly
very rarely.
Much to discuss there. Jill Tucker, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Should San Francisco police officers carry tasers? The question is once again on the table following the deadly shooting of San Francisco resident Mario Woods earlier this month. Previous proposals to arm the department with these stun guns was met with vigorous opposition. Here now with more on this and other political stories is Scott Shafer, senior editor of KQED's Politics and Government Desk. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Thuy.
Well, the SFPD has been asking for tasers for years. They'll be happy if they finally get them this time around. But there's been stiff opposition in the past. Who is opposed now?
Well, now you're hearing from homeless advocates, the Coalition on Homelessness. They're afraid that these kinds of tasers are going to be misused, and street people with mental illness are going to be particularly victimized. The ACLU has some concerns. They think that these stun guns are not a silver bullet, so to speak, that you need to change the culture of the SFPD. They don't want to say, well, let's just get these stun guns and then everything will be fine, because they feel like that could just be papering over a bigger problem in terms of use of force and those policies around that.
And Police Chief Greg Suhr had said that if they had tasers as an option in the Mario Woods case, Mr. Woods would still be alive today. Is there doubt about that?
Well, sure, there's always doubt, because things, who knows what might have happened. I mean, God forbid, you remember in 2009, Oscar Grant was killed by a BART police officer who thought he was using his taser. That might have been a question of training. But certainly the police want, and many people feel they should now have, less deadly options, and tasers certainly fit the bill.
Another big issue in San Francisco, the jail. The current jail at San Francisco City Hall is seismically unsafe. And just about everybody agrees it needs to be replaced. But yet, this week, the Board of Supervisors refused to allocate $250 million to build a new one, even though the state is offering $80 million to help subsidize it. Why did they do that?
Well, as somebody said, I think it was the DA, this could be the most expensive gift ever. You get $80 million from the state, but then you got to spend more than $100 million just to build the thing. The main question, though, San Francisco is a city that's not too intent on putting people in jail. They want diversion, they want substance abuse, they want mental health counseling, and they felt that the jail, as drawn up, wouldn't have enough of that, and so they wanted the city to go back to the drawing board. And they had the DA, the district attorney, George Gascon, on their side, and that gave a lot of cover to opponents of the jail, and so the board said, we don't want it.
But it was certainly a blow to Mayor Lee and the new sheriff, Vicki Hennessy, who supported it.
Yep.
The new year around the corner, we have a host of new laws coming into play and taking effect, including one that's going to change the way law enforcement officers do their job. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so this one is going to require that law enforcement officers keep data, keep track of race and ethnicity of people that they stop, not just when they're driving, but even pedestrians. And the idea is this is aimed at racial profiling. We've heard a lot about that in the last few years, and it's really come into focus with all these video camera tapings of traffic stops that went bad. And so it's going to require these law enforcement up and down the state to keep data so that we'll know exactly what's happening. And some feel, too, it could be a deterrent if they know that they're going to have to report all of these stops that they make.
Also another law called the Fair Pay Act, the first of its kind in the nation. What will that do? Well,
California law used to require equal pay for equal work. But this new law amends it to say essentially similar work. And the reason for that is that employers were kind of getting around the old regulations, and they were saying, well, this isn't 100% the same. It's not equal work. So this kind of fine-tunes it, closes that loophole, and it's going to give employees, women in particular, more ammunition to go and get equal pay when they're in jobs, and not just focused on their own workplace, but they can look across at other workplaces as well. This new law will allow for that, too.
And it applies even if your job titles are different.
Exactly.
Finally, the governor signed a trio of bills, all related to medical marijuana. Why has it taken so long to do this, given that California voters approved medical
20 years
marijuana
ago.
20 years
I know.
ago, that's right.
Yeah, well, it's been a kind of a standoff between law enforcement and the billion-dollar industry. The governor got in the middle and decided they helped negotiate the differences, and so now they finally have this. I think part of it, a big part of this, is that they see that there's going to be a ballot measure next year, perhaps, to legalize marijuana in California, and so they see these regulations that are going to be created as sort of laying the groundwork for that.
Sure. In fact, I think there are about 5 ballot measures in circulation, and it'll be interesting to see what lands on the ballot.
They're going to have to get rolled into one.
All right, Scott Shafer, thank you.
You bet.
The holiday season is a time for giving, and for many people, that includes charitable causes. According to Giving USA, Americans gave more than $358 billion to charities last year. Individuals accounted for most of it, more than 70%. Trailing behind were foundations, bequests, and corporations. Joining us now to discuss who gives and how those decisions are made are Tony Rodriguez of GuideStar, a nonprofit database, Perla Nee of Great Nonprofits, a charity crowdsourcing website, and Lucy Bernholtz from Stanford University Center on Philanthropy and Civil Society. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Tony, what should people look for when they decide who to give to?
I think end of the year is a perfect time to do a little retrospective, kind of look back to see the organizations that you've supported in the past. It's also a perfect time to become more proactive and intentional for the coming year. And so what we like to talk about is make sure that you clarify your values. You know, what is important to you? You might even develop a personal mission statement. And if you're looking for ideas, go onto LinkedIn or go on to private foundations websites to kind of get an idea. Secondly, I'd ask you to, once you've come up with a handful of nonprofits that you're interested in supporting, focus on their mission. Learn about this organization, what their theory of change is, what their outcomes are going to be, how they intend to change and make the world a better place.
So definitely do a little bit of homework. Perla, how is your organization's approach to giving different?
We think that donors care that their organizations are making a difference on the ground with the people that they want to help. So our organization, for instance, we just released our 2015 list of top-rated nonprofits in San Francisco, and these are the People's Choice Awards. These are organizations that have been nominated by people who volunteer for these nonprofits, who've been served by these nonprofits, or who have donated to these organizations.
So is it like a Yelp for charities?
Yes, kind of like a Yelp or a TripAdvisor. Just like, you know, when you travel to Paris, you're going to look up a hotel on TripAdvisor because other people have stayed there. Similarly, for a nonprofit, you want to see what other donors and other clients have said about that organization's service.
So it's very much like how people do typically give. They listen to their friends, but in this case, they go online to see what their friends or other people who have donated are thinking about that charity. Lucy, according to Giving USA, most people give to religious organizations. In fact, 32%. Education gets 15%. Foundations and human services get about 12% each. Do people put a lot of research into deciding where their money goes? I mean, that's certainly what Tony has advised, but do people actually do it?
You know, most people give with both their head and their heart. So especially given what Tony said, if you've been giving to certain organizations for a long period of time, unless there's something that either the problem they work on has been solved or there's something gone wrong, a lot of people are going to continue to give to those organizations. The research done about the research that people do shows that only about 10% of donors actually do real research on the organizations.
Just 10%?
Yeah, it's a very low number. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. There hasn't been, until the last decade or so, there haven't been a lot of really good resources that a donor could check. So they were pretty much dependent on their own legwork.
You know, I'd jump in here. I'd say that's true, but I also said we're seeing some positive trends around research. We are seeing, I guess, the Money for Good report, which is one of the reports that study donor behavior, is showing over the last 3 reports that it is doubling. You know, went from 3% to 6% to now to 10% around. People are looking for information, and so I just wanted to put that in there because I think it is changing quickly.
Well, and there's another thing that's actually just been launched this week. An economics professor out of Yale has launched a whole new process called the impact audits.
Yeah.
So the challenge has been there's different kinds of data you can find. There's the kind of information you can get when you actually go visit, as Perla suggests. There's the kind of comparable financial information you can get, and there's a lot of websites that provide that information. But what most people really care about is the organization accomplishing something.
Yeah.
And we're just really beginning to get to the place where we have comparable impact information that allows someone to make a judgment about whether an organization is effective.
And sometimes the research can be very hard to do, right? Even high-profile figures can get caught in something they didn't mean to. Probably one of the most high-profile stories was the 3 Cups of Tea author, and he had claimed to be building all these schools in Afghanistan. It turned out to be a sham, but in fact, even President Obama gave $100,000 to his charity. So how difficult is it to pin down how much an organization spends on overhead, how much of an effect they have on the ground, Perla?
So those are rare exceptions. Most nonprofits are not fraudulent and not siphoning away the majority of their money. If you look at Silicon Valley nonprofits, the typical budget is $250,000 a year. And if you visit these organizations, you can see they're not spending a lot on their rent or on their computers. So when donors ask me, you know, how can I trust this organization? I tell them, go and visit, talk to the executive director. You can go and see for yourself that most of these organizations are really headed by dedicated and passionate staff who are really trying hard to make a difference.
And Tony, how important should overhead costs be in determining whether to give to an organization?
Yeah, all financial information is a valid data point. Overhead in particular is challenging because it's become a singular focus of individuals and donors. It's kind of gotten away from itself. So overhead, for those of us that don't know, is essentially just the administrative and fundraising costs that an organization has to spend. And so to focus on that as a percentage of total expenses or revenue, it just doesn't make any sense. You know, when we're talking about nonprofits, the first thing you should be talking about is their effectiveness. What are they doing? What outcomes are they producing? How are they changing the world? Then you can consider what are the true costs to achieve those outcomes. And so that's where we have to start.
So is the whole overhead importance thing, is that just an overhead myth?
Yes, so thank you. We've actually, GuideStar, Charity Navigator, and the Better Business Bureau have come together to kind of write a letter to the donors of America and a letter to the donors, to the nonprofits of America. And in there we explain that we should shift the focus to outcomes and change versus one financial ratio. And so that's really, if you hear it commonly, what do they spend on overhead? And that's a great opportunity to just kind of have a better conversation with that person around, there's so many other things that we should focus on.
What are some of the best ways that you can measure outcome, though? What are the metrics that we should be using, Lucy?
Well, there's a number. It really depends on what kind of work the organization is doing. So you're going to have different outcomes if you're an educational organization or if you're an advocacy organization, if you're doing work on housing. And within each of those areas, actually, there tend to be some very good measures and standards that housing organizations will hold themselves to, or that educational programs will hold themselves to. But what a donor definitely wants to look for in this day and age is easy access to the information from the organization about what it's doing, what it's accomplished. Its own self-reported information is going to have some validity. There are a few organizations out there that can look at nonprofits across the country or across a sector, but there's 1.5 million nonprofits out there, and given the generally low donor demand for this information, that's not yet a big market. So there's still going to be some legwork needed.
So, if the information isn't easily accessible, that's probably a red flag right there.
That's a red flag right there.
Lucy, I want to ask you about the Zuckerberg gift as well. As you know, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and his wife Priscilla Chan, they recently announced they will commit 99% of their Facebook shares to social causes. Those shares are currently valued at about $45 billion. Huge amount, $45 billion, but they didn't set up a traditional private foundation. What did they do instead?
They set up something called an LLC, a limited liability corporation, company, and LLCs are all over the place. We see them all, not just in this area of doing social good, but people use them for all sorts of purposes. So the first thing to realize is that there was no gift involved, and I mean that quite literally. All the family did was move their resources from one pocket to another. Now that in and of itself is neither here nor there. They also made a very important public promise to donate their resources to making change in the world.
Well, they didn't get any huge tax benefits as a result of doing that. So why do you think they did it?
They did it because the Chan Zuckerberg family and my family, your family, Tony's family, Perla's family, we all have a number of different ways we can use our money to make a difference in the world. We can do it by charitable giving. We can do it through the way we invest. We can do it by getting involved in political giving. And we increasingly and probably throughout our lives do it by how we shop, whether we buy certain things or don't buy certain things. And what this act did, the Chan Zuckerberg initiative did, was draw attention, but because it's so large, to the fact that if you really want to make change in the world, you want to use all those resources, all those tools that are available.
But are there concerns here about, let's say down the line, they could give to a political cause through their LLC, and that is not a philanthropic
No, it
endeavor.
Absolutely isn't, and many of their investments won't be either. So the thing is that we have in the U.S. traditionally had two very different values about politics and charity. And when it comes to politics, we've said you can support the political work you believe in, but we want to know who's behind it, whose name is on that money. In charity, on the other hand, we've actually celebrated anonymous giving. So what's happened is we've got these two values that are in conflict, but we've intermingled the way we fund them. So it is absolutely possible now for anyone to send money through a not-for-profit organization, and literally their name gets laundered off of it. They become anonymous, and that work goes into, the money goes into politics, or the work is very political. So and it's a real systemic structural problem that we've created, that the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative draws attention to, but they didn't create it.
So that's a fuzzy area.
I would add also that if you do have the resources, the way to make changes to be able to move kind of progress, not only philanthropically or charitably, but also policy, also in the private sector. So it's a really smart way. It gives them a lot of opportunity to kind of really invest and donate in many different ways to really accelerate change. And so we're very enthusiastic. I support that. It's a modern way of kind of framing or setting up your giving.
And Perla, just real quickly, how do Bay Area residents stack up? Are they good at giving, or more work needs to be done?
More work needs to be done. According to the latest figures that we have, the Bay Area is out of 50 cities in the country. We're respectively 45th and 48th, San Francisco and San Jose. So we're not as generous as we think we are.
That's amazing, despite the enormous wealth in many pockets of the Bay Area.
That's right.
Well, thank you all for being here today. Lucy Bernholtz with Stanford, Tony Rodriguez with GuideStar, and Perla Lee, great nonprofits. Pleasure to have you all.
Thank you, Erin.
This week, the FAA announced that nearly all recreational users of drones must register their flying machines through a website that goes live Monday. While many drones are purchased off the shelves, one group of enthusiasts are building their own for fun and competition. Producer Shara Sadiq takes us on a high-flying look at their world.
You guys ready? Okay. My name's Ken Liu. I'm a product design engineer at a large company in the Silicon Valley. When I'm not working as a product design engineer, I'm a drone pilot. Every drone pilot you see is usually wearing a pair of goggles. The goggles have a wireless video receiver. This allows us to see the image from the pilot camera as if we were sitting right there. What I really love about flying drones is the feeling of flying, of real flight. And I feel like I'm in the cockpit of an aircraft. I can dance around trees, go around obstacles, fly 100 feet in the air and then dive down. It's a feeling of weightlessness, freedom, and the ability to do whatever I want in the air. My call sign happens to be Flying Bear, and it comes from the fact that I'm a UC Berkeley grad, so I'm a Cal Bear, and I've always said, I'd want to be Superman, I want to be able to fly. So I'm Flying Bear. The drones that we use for racing are very different than the things that can be bought at Best Buy, Fry's, or Amazon. We make all these from scratch. We select all the right components for high-performance racing. I've been able to fly one of these racing drones up to 80 miles an hour. Cost for a racing drone is between $400 to $500. The video system, the motors, the flight controller, and the frame. Build time for me is about 3 to 4 hours.
All in the cars.
I built it on this frame because these are... Every day for my lunch hour, I try to go to the park and practice with my friends.
Go! That's lap 2. One more, guys.
Racing with pilots that are highly skilled is important, so I learned how to push myself and also learn how to push without pushing too far.
Right at the edge, man.
Nice race.
Thanks, man.
There are so many challenges with drone racing. There are a lot of obstacles on the track. There are really tight turns leading into narrow gates. And simultaneously, there's a mental factor of trying to race as fast as possible to catch the person in front. A lot of races are single elimination, so if somebody doesn't beat the first pilot, they're done. Dang it! Oh no! All right, guys, thanks for coming out for a great day of practice. See you all tomorrow at sunrise for race day. I got one hit, broke a motor. On November 21st of 2015, we have the Aerial Sports League's Fall Classic race. We have drone racing, combat, and freestyle, all on the same day. At competitions, there is a lot of adrenaline coursing through my body. I've been at competitions where my thumbs are shaking so hard, I can't fly.
And they're in the air.
Whoa!
Oh no, clip one flag.
I didn't even get to finish because I got hit in the air. So I hope this still works. I'll try to stay optimistic and then cross my fingers that I do well in Heat 4.
Lap 3. First place, Ken Liu, doing a victory lap.
My wife, Pam, she gets it. She helps me take photos at the events. She supports me and makes me better at what I do. So this was our 4th qualifying round, and things went right for me for a change. Pam was spotting me, telling me where I was relative to the other pilots, which is really important. The 20 points I earned here will hopefully bump me up into the top places and move on to the next round.
They have to go around the track 3 times.
Each racer is judged by somebody watching the same live feed from the pilot camera. The judge is making sure that each pilot is going through every obstacle and around every flag.
He's in a spin, he's out of control.
If they don't finish the obstacle and then they complete their lap, they're disqualified. How am I, Pam?
And the excitement is palpable.
Finish!
Oh, I think we have a winner.
Bring it down, Ken. 2 and 3. And that's Nate for third.
That puts us in the finals. 5 years from now, I think drone racing is going to be a very serious sport with endorsements, professional pilots, with annual contracts. Don't tell my boss, but if I was offered the right contract, I would quit my day job as a design engineer to fly.
Oh man, who is that in the lead?
Steady.
All right, the amazing Ken Liu. Oh no! Oh no, that had to hurt.
I couldn't see it. The sun. When I came around that corner, I was going really fast, and the sun flare, all I saw was the sun. And it smacked straight into the gate. So now I'm done. I got last in that heat, so I'm not going to move on to the championship race.
We have liftoff.
Even though I crashed, that's racing. There's so many factors that go into it. Anything can happen that puts even the best pilots into the ground. But I'm feeling good. The event today was a huge success. I had a ton of fun.
The world leaders of drone entertainment.
Not my day. On to the next one.
There's always the next race. A special program note, we will be off the air for the next 2 weeks. We hope you have a wonderful holiday season and see you here again in 2016. I'm Thuy Vu. Thanks so much for watching. For all of KQED's news coverage, please go to kqednews.org.
Support for science programming is provided by these generous contributors.